Can everyone hear me or do I need a mic?
We can hear you here.
Hello? Can you hear me? Back there? What? It should really work here, right? Okay. Okay, so prefer without a mic, so I hope I'm going to be loud enough. Anyway, so today's topic, as we've all seen, is about how kosher can we be at Starbucks. This topic actually was picked by Levi Barfield because I had done a video for a website called Stump the Rabbi, and actually some of them made its way to COL. So for those people that actually seen the video, or those people that have scrolled through, see my face and say, "Oh, I know that guy." Either way, I'm going to have to add a little more information over here. So don't think that you've just seen the video and you've seen it all. So one of the things about coffee, which is quite interesting, is that people find it comfortable to go to a Starbucks or any place that has any kind of cafe and get a coffee or a coffee product and without any problems. However, if we think about it, a Starbucks is a non-kosher establishment, pretty much like a McDonald's. So someone walks out of Starbucks with some kind of mocha frappuccino, and no one's going to bat an eyelid. Yet someone walks out of a Macca's with a McMuffin, that's already a different story. So really the question is, why is that? Why are we more lax when it comes to coffee? Yet when it comes to any other kind of kosher, non-kosher establishment, all of a sudden, no, we are going to take a different stance. So really what we're going to do is the way we're going to do it here is that we're going to start with coffee in general production of coffee, and the kashrus behind that, how sensitive it is, how sensitive it isn't. And then we're going to kind of get into the whole cafe / Starbucks, and we'll take the rug out of your feet there. Okay, so harvest. Let's start from the beginning, right? Operations. In the beginning, that's pretty much what your coffee is going to look like. It's a coffee fruit. It's they're actually kind of like little cherries. And what will happen is the beans themselves are actually the seeds that are inside the fruit. So the term bean is kind of misleading, which is why we don't consider it kitnius, because it's not a bean. It's actually the seed inside the fruit. So the whole point is to remove the fruit and actually get to the seed. Similar to actually when you find with cocoa, it's all the same kind of thing as well, is that actually in countries that grow cocoa, the cacao plant, so the fruit itself is actually quite nice, but it's not really solid. No one really cares for it. They just move from the seed. So basically what happens is that the fruit is removed, so either fully or partially, and then it will go into fermentation. So what they'll do is they'll harvest off the fruit, and obviously harvest off the fruit, the cherries. They'll take the fruit over there, and then they'll basically, depending on what type of coffee you've got, is how much of the fruit they'll actually remove. Some of them will allow to ferment with the fruit in there. Now, again, it's a natural fermentation, no yeast is added or anything like that. It basically just sits out there in the farms, and they just wait for the naturally to the fruit on it to ferment 24 hours plus, and then they get rid of it. So now, depending on what quality coffee you have is how much of the fruit they'll take off, because the fruit gives a little sweetness to it. And if you've got not such a good quality of coffee, so therefore you want to mask over the lack of quality by keeping some of that fruit on with the fermentation, will add notes of sweetness to it. So, and there's certain countries that that's pretty much the way they do it anyways, Costa Rica being one of them. So after the beans are all fermented, they're out there, they're dry, the next step is pretty much at this point, your beans are green. So whenever they refer to green beans, this is pretty much where vegetable green beans, but green coffee beans, I should be more specific. So this is what it is at this point. The coffees are at this point green. So now, when you're talking about regular coffee, at this point, they're going to go to the roaster. However, when it comes to decaf, decaf's a little different. So decaffeination is always done prior to roasting. Apparently, I've never tried this, but apparently if you roast it first, then you do the decaffeination process. Basically, it tastes like sawdust. So decaf has to be done prior to the roasting itself. And most, coffee roasters or coffee places that roast, they usually bring in all their beans decaf. There's only very few places that actually do the decaffeination process compared to how many places actually roast the coffee. Now, the beans are first heated with hot water or steam because the point is that you want to kind of extract the caffeine out of it. You want to open up its pores. That's basically of the bean. That's the first step of it. Then afterwards, we have a solvent-based decaffeination. That's one way of one general way of decaffeinating is by using a solvent. And the two solvents are generally used methyl chloride or ethyl acetate. So now methyl chloride, no big deal. Ethyl acetate, generally no big deal. However, the ethyl acetate is it is a reaction with ethanol, which is alcohol, and acetic acid, which is vinegar. So now, ethanol, alcohol, as we know, could come from many different sources. And depending which part of the world you're at, there's going to be a grain, which is the main, which is mainly used, especially industrially, which is mainly used for alcohol, for ethanol. So in the United States, corn is very popular. So therefore, when it comes to Pesach and decaf, so therefore, obviously, you got a kidney decision. Other places, for example, Europe, so therefore, wheat is the main source, or other similar types of grains, I guess, but mainly wheat is the main source of industrial ethanol. So therefore, we've got a problem with comments. So when it comes to decaf, it's something to take into consideration. And acetic acid generally is all done. I mean, acetic acid is vinegar, can be done with many different types of ways. Obviously, we know, we're aware that wine can be done as well. But when you look at industrially, there's no real shush of acetic acid being done with wine or with wine vinegar because it's fairly expensive. And to get to, if a wine spoils and turns into vinegar, so then they're selling it as red wine vinegar, they're not going to send it off to a decaf place and use it for there. Similarly to ethanol, ethanol also can be made from grapes. Just a side note, whenever we're getting vodka, there is such a concept that you can have vodka from grapes, and so therefore, something always to look into when you ever have a look at a bottle of vodka. It should always say grain vodka, potato vodka, whatever it is, because that's where you want the source of ethanol to be. Anyways, so that is, ethyl acetate is, I would say, the most popular route if you're going solvent-wise. That's the most popular route of decaffeinated coffee. Then you have the non-solvent way, which is known as, one of them is known as the Swiss wash, or they use CO2. So Swiss wash became popular starting off in Switzerland in, I believe, in the 1970s, where they discovered that if you basically wash the coffee beans first, and then within the water, you're going to have flavor, you're going to have the oils that are in there and caffeine. Now, that first batch of beans obviously are flavorless because it's now on the water. But take that water with the flavor, add it to other beans. So therefore, because the water itself has the flavor and has the oils, it's not going to extract from the flavored oils from the new set of beans. So what it will do is basically keep them in there, but it will still wash off the caffeine. So that's one thing that they discovered, the Swiss wash. A lot of organic places will use the Swiss wash because obviously methyl chloride and ethyl acetate, it's harder to get organic. And then there's another way you can do it with CO2. You put it in a vacuum chamber, you blast CO2 on it, and then you'll get the caffeine off that. Now, just a heads up, decaffeinated does not mean caffeine free. Okay, there is still a little bit of caffeine that is left over. Okay, as we all know, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Similarly to gluten-free oats, not actually gluten-free, but legally they're gluten-free. So just keep that in mind. It's not purely caffeine-free. So anyways, that is when it comes back to decaffeination. So practically speaking, Swiss wash, CO2 way of removing the caffeine, really no problem when it comes to couches at all. Methyl chloride or ethyl acetate, no real problem year round. Comes to Pesach, yes, you have to ethyl acetate, could be an issue. So when purchasing decaffeinated beans, if you're going to use it for Pesach, you really should have a hefsher, just make sure it's done the right way. Now we're coming to roasting. So we've got our beans, either they're regular beans or they're decaffeinated beans, and then they're going to go to the roaster. And this is where most of the coffee production, the places that produces roasted coffee, they will receive it at this point. They'll receive it free. So first step, interesting to note, is that regular and decaf are usually shared. Okay, they don't really have roasters that are for regular coffee and roasters that are for decaffeinated coffee. So again, a point to know when it comes Pesach-wise that these things are shared. Now, flavors are added after roasting. So if I get regular coffee, I don't have to be concerned that maybe they're putting flavors also for roasting. That doesn't happen. The roasting is always done with unflavored beans. If they want to add a flavor on afterwards, that is only done afterwards. They'll add in a liquid flavor and they'll mix that all around. Now, flavors are, they do need a hefsher, right? If you see something which is, orange flavor, vanilla flavor, whatever it is, doesn't mean it's vanilla, doesn't mean it's orange. I've seen interesting compounds that look quite interesting, and lo and behold, you taste it, voila, it's cherry. You put that in your cherry coke and good to go. So reality is that whatever flavor they say it is, doesn't mean it actually comes from that source. And you can make so many different mixtures of so many different things and comes out smelling like many different flavors. So flavors, any flavored coffee should come with a hefsher. Now, grinding and packaging generally are separate, because if you think about it, these flavors, you don't want the flavors going into the unflavored coffee. You don't want, you're saying these flavors, they do give off a flavor and they're something that can be quite strong. So again, if I get ground regular coffee, I don't have to be concerned that the grinder again is used for the same with the flavored coffee. I don't have to be concerned with the packaging as well, because again, it's very hard to clean these things, especially ground coffee. It's very hard to clean the machine, their packaging machine, back and forth. So companies generally will keep them separate. That's the general thing. Now, for those people that need their coffee straight away, we have instant. First step, instant coffee. You have the coffee beans that are extracted usually with water, by water. So they'll be boiling coffee beans, and you'll have that coffee from there. Then there's two processes generally that are done at that point. You'll have the water will either be spray dried or be freeze dried. So spray drying, there's many types of productions that are done with spray drying. However, industrially, spray dried coffee is usually dedicated for spray drying coffee. So companies that will do instant coffee would have their spray dryer just for spray drying coffee. Again, coffee, flavors are very strong, and when you're using flavors back and forth between on the same equipment, if the flavor is going to be very, very strong, it's very hard for companies to constantly clean in between. So usually, companies that make instant coffee, they're going to spray dry it, it'll be done. For those people, I should really introduce what a spray dryer is. It's basically what you're doing is that it's a very big machine, kind of like a cyclone, and it will spray the liquid on top, and the heat on the bottom will remove all the liquid, and then you'll have a kind of a powder. So that's and these machines are absolutely massive. They go 4 or 5 stories high. They're really, really, really tall. They're really big piece of equipment. Now, freeze drying is a little different. Freeze drying is done where they'll freeze the coffee and they'll put it in kind of a chamber, which will dry it off with and slowly it will dry and remove the liquid from it there, and then they'll keep the coffee there. That's another way of how it's done. Freeze drying is the preferred method because you're able to keep the flavor better that way. But then again, like everything, if it's better to make, it's obviously more costly to make. Spray drying, I mean, you can produce way more for a spray dryer than you can through freeze drying. But either way, those are the 2 ways that are generally done for instant. And again, no real cashless concerns. And on any of those fronts, freeze drying, yes, you can. Freeze drying can be shared with other types of productions that are done at higher temperatures. but the way that coffee is done, it's done at a colder temperature, so therefore you don't really have a problem with our equipment. And however, one thing to look out for with instant coffees is because instant coffee is generally a cheaper type of coffee, and so therefore you're going to have, some of them will actually add additives into it, so you got to look out for that. And again, additives into it, you're going to need extra flavors as well. Any flavors added to it, you're going to need extra for that. So let's look now at the, let's just back up a second, look at the general overall kashrus when it comes to coffees. So unflavored coffee year round, generally you don't have any worries about it. Because again, it's just the coffee, the roasting that is done, nothing's really shared with it. The whole production all the way through is pretty much dedicated to it, nothing's added to it, you're pretty much okay. Now, but when we go into Pesach, so again, there is decaf, which can be an issue for Pesach, and flavors as well. Flavors can also be an issue. So again, you should get those with the extra, and there's plenty of them out there with the extra. So now, that's the general kashrus regarding coffee. So now, as you can see, coffee itself is not that major of a deal when it comes to kashrus, and so therefore, this is why when it comes to our culture and society, going to a coffee house and getting coffee. So now we can kind of understand where it came from. You know, because I do get this question, why are people more comfortable getting a coffee, but not comfortable getting other things? So because overall, kashrus-wise, the coffee is not that big of a deal. So let's talk about cafes. Okay, cafes in general. So interestingly enough, throughout history, even going to cafes has been a thing. It's not just recently with the introduction of Starbucks, but they've been doing it for hundreds and hundreds of years. So, this is a Gillian Marshall in Yeridea in the beginning of Simon Kuf Yud Gimel, which talks about Bishul Akum. So he has a little snippet over here. And now, just for the record, this Marshal is not the Marshal that we know from tomorrow, it's a different one. That's Shmuel Edel's. The Marshal here on Shemar in Yeridea is Rabbi Shlomo Eger, as his father obviously is well known, Rabbi Kiva Eger. And so this is his, so that's his son. And he wrote a little commentary on Yeridea as well. And he also referred to it as the Marshal, so not to get mixed up. Now, interestingly enough, if you look at history, so Shlomo Eger lived approximately, I would say, about the late, maybe the late early 1800s, right? And even then, people drinking at coffee houses was a thing. So this is something which has gone back quite generations. Now, when we start reading this chubah, it's actually a little interesting over here. So this is the first part of this little thing. So he basically says regarding the drinking coffee in a coffee house, called a coffee heiser. So it's written in the chubah of Bari Hasek that interesting word we use in Mina Kedoshim, okay, that you're allowed to drink coffee up there because they do not mix into it anything. So it's not shchiach, it's not common for them to mix any isser into it, right? That's how it starts on the shul. Now, it's very basic. The very basic actually was a Talmud of the Rameh from Pano, of Menachem Azaria, who was an Italian Rav in late 1500s. So you're looking over here as he quotes by Shlomo Eger quotes the Ba'asek, who lived, I would say, late 15, early 1600s, and we see that was something that was common as well. He's talking about basically what you find in coffee houses. So he's talking about the actual chubah itself. I did get a copy online, and to be honest, the print is shocking. So I was able to kind of navigate through the chubah itself. The chubah the Ba'asek talks about is he says that they wrote a shayla to him, and he says from Arches of Mizrach, from the eastern countries. Now my understanding is I don't think even were in Japan and China at that point. That was more later on, like late 1800, people started getting there. So my assumption is that he's talking about the Middle East. And also, if you go to Japan, China, coffee is not really popular, it's more tea. So my assumption is that he's talking about the Middle East and, you know, the Arabian countries that drink coffee over there. So people asked him, is it a problem drinking coffee from there? So now, as I said, the Bar Asik, he was a Talmud of the Raman from Pano, so obviously he was Italian. And obviously I don't know Italian culture back then, but I've had some experience with Italian culture in this century. And I can tell you is that the Italians are very particular with everything, and especially their coffee as well, even though they don't have coffee beans. Coffee beans are usually done around the equator. So, but the Italians are very particular. Is there any Italians in the crowd here? So, do I make a call myself? No, okay. So Italians are very particular. In the morning, you have your cappuccino. God forbid you ask for a cappuccino throughout the day. They just give you a look and you say, okay, you're American. So, but throughout the day afterwards, you have an espresso. That's it. Italians don't, throughout the day, they don't mix anything with it. It's just espresso. You drive down the highway, and then every rest stop over there, you go off there, they have a big bar, and there's a bunch of people just knocking off espresso. That's pretty much how they do it. Every company that I would visit, so before you start, coffee, they bring you water and a coffee. Water is to quench your thirst, coffee is just to enjoy, basically, and give you a little kick. We'll do this around the company, it's all come back, oh, coffee, yeah, okay, fine, you know, and it just goes, so you visit about 4 or 5 companies a day, then yeah, you get really buzzed. But anyway, so the coffee, so as we see, so especially, I mean, I don't know if he ever made it to the Middle Eastern countries to know exactly what goes on over there, but he was definitely comfortable in saying that there's really nothing going on over there. Because again, in Italy as well, as we see even today, that you drink coffee straight, you don't mix it with anything else. Now, that's the first part of this, what the Gillian Marshall writes. Then he goes on to say, but during our times, he says it's a little different. So now again, we're talking about a few centuries later, right? We're talking about late 1500s, early 1600s, till about late 1700s to early 1800s. So that's you know. So he says, by our times, we see basically, back in his times, maybe they only drank coffee black. But in our times, it's very common to actually put milk into the coffee. And obviously the milk they're using is Polovakum. Again, we didn't have the Moshe's Heter of government oversight. So basically any milk out there was pretty much, it was considered Polovakum. But maybe you could say that, however, because it was a cliche, so we don't have to worry that much. So now just a quick crash course on Kli Rishon, Kli Sheni. Kli Rishon is basically, if I have a pot on the stove, that's going to be a Kli Rishon. What defines a Kli Rishon is that basically the walls of the pot or the Kli, whatever it is hot themselves. Why? Because it has a heat source. Okay. Now, the moment I take that and I pour that into another cup, that is a Kli Sheni. It's the second cup, but also the point about it is that the walls themselves aren't hot because they weren't connected to any heat source, and therefore they actually start cooling everything down. So there's different opinions that brought down the Shulchan of exactly what a Kli Sheni does. Does it absorb? Does it extract? And so according to Shulchan, it's the Mechaber, he writes that the Diavad is pretty fine, but you should be cautious at least for those opinions that say there's something that happens with Kli Sheni. But even then, whatever does happen with Kli Sheni, it won't. The walls of the Kli won't absorb fully. It's only the clipper, basically the outer layer. If you were to peel it off or whatever it is, the outer layer is what actually we have the issue anyways. But the evidence there, you know, we're pretty much it's fine. So therefore, that's where he's coming to, and he says nowadays, if you think of it back then, at least you got your cup of coffee, right? You got your coffee inside. And then you pour in the milk into. The milk is entering the coffee at a Kli Sheni stage. If I had a cup and I poured in hot milk, that wouldn't be exactly Kli Sheni. That would be considered Kli Rishon. Which again, that's for sure has which is at a hotter stage. But here, if you're saying Kli Sheni, so my assumption is obviously how a lot of us drink coffee at home. You have your cup of coffee and then you pour in the milk into it afterwards. So therefore, the milk is entering at a Kli Sheni state. So as we can see over here. What?
But you're not allowed to drink the milk.
No, you're right, not allowed to drink milk. So he's basically saying, I guess it's more of a trying to either give a tirutz to why he said it was absolutely no fine. In theory, you're right. We shouldn't really. We shouldn't be going for cliche and status. We shouldn't. But he's
No, that cliche is permission.
right.
But how about you're not allowed to drink it?
Right, 100%. But he's talking about, okay, so we're talking about the kli itself. So you're going, obviously you're not drinking the milk. But if you go and you have a coffee, before how can you use the mugs, right? So that's what he was basically discussing there. So now obviously nowadays we can get a coffee to go, and so we don't even have the shiloh altogether, right? You just get a coffee to go, and you're fine. But back then they didn't have disposable cups, and so therefore what the shiloh is the mug. Can I actually use the mug? Can I get a black coffee, right? Yeah.
Steamed coffee, steamed milk.
And we're getting there.
Okay.
Okay, so we're getting there. All right. So now, so that, as we can see, is that the shiloh of coffee houses and cafes, it's something that has been discussed for centuries and centuries, and this is definitely no news here. Now, let's go to Starbucks. Okay. So now, first of all, shout out to Kosher Native, who used to work at Starbucks, and she has the inside scoop, obviously, of what goes on there. And we have a lot of discussion back and forth between what you can do and can't do. There happens to be an article from the CRC, the Chicago Rabbinical Council in Chicago. They're one of the biggest hashgachas out there, and additionally, they are also their community bad, and so therefore they, apart from giving hashgachas as well, they also write many articles that help the community. So, for example, if you were to go with the OU or the OK or something like that and ask them what's the status on certain establishments, we then would say, well, we don't certify and we don't know what's going on. CRC kind of took an extra step into this because, again, they're looking out for the community and they know that people go into Starbucks. So they wrote, I believe early 2000s, they wrote a whole article about it. The do's and don'ts of what you can do in Starbucks. Or should I say the do's, the don'ts, and the don'ts, and the don'ts. And a lot of very, very interesting information over there. They go into the whole array of the drinks you can drink, you can't drink. And so everyone's got any extra time and really wants to know, you should check that up online. It's very, very interesting. However, one thing is that with my conversation with Haisaris, therefore I got to learn a little differently than what they actually wrote in this article. I'm sorry, but it's for the worst. Anyway, so let's start into heated milk drinks. So we're going into lattes, cappuccinos, and all that kind of stuff. I wrote a section because, to be honest, I don't know right now what else they put out in the menu, but that's basically those are the two ones. Interestingly enough, for us, the word latte actually sounds all nice and fancy, but in Italian it doesn't mean milk. So that's why I guess Starbucks never really took off. You can't present a fancy coffee calling it a latte, basically in Italy when you just call it milk. So the issue is the steam ones. So as you see with the machines that they have a wand that comes out and kind of like an elephant's nose, and you have their, it pushes out steam. Now that steam wand, clear issue, right? No shallow air. The heat source is the steam that comes out. That thing gets hot. Now, problem is two things. Well, first of all, it's shared with milk and eggnog. Milk, we're talking about regular milk, right? And it's shared with milk and shared with eggnog. So again, you obviously have to hope that the eggnog is kosher just to begin with. But I don't know the kosher status of that eggnog. But anyways, so that's one. So if that's the case, it's shared with equipment that use dairy. So what would be the status of that kli? So now obviously it would be considered dairy equipment. So dairy equipment is very fine line. It depends for those people that keep cholov stam, they don't keep cholov, they're not going to have cholov yisrael like most of us do. And then that's a difference of how you actually look at the steam one. So for us that we keep cholov yisrael, so cholov stam for us is not kosher milk, right? So the problem would be is that steam one is being used with non-kosher milk, so therefore it's not kosher for someone who keeps cholov yisrael. For those that keep cholov stam, so then that's a different story. Then it's just milk. So that's a different thing. So it depends if you look at it as the milk being an issur d'rabbanan, or do you look at the milk being a heter? So it's differently on how we look at it. So that's problem number one. Now, that was my understanding until I spoke to Sarah. Then she basically said, no, the problem here only is that it's wiped between drinks and cleaned once a day. So when you have a steam wand, basically what you're doing is you're taking a cup, you're putting it in the steam will heat up the milk, nice and proper, right? So, problem is that when you wipe the steam wand, inside that wand, there is residue of milk. And it's very difficult to easily clean it out. It's not something you can, definitely not something you can just wipe the outside off, right? Anyone who has, I know in our office, we have a little container where we keep the milk that goes into the coffee machine. And if you look in there, you're going to start to see a film of residue build up in the milk. And generally when companies have to clean equipment that's had milk or pasteurized, whatever it is, they always have to throw in caustic to actually get rid of that. So you can't just do a wipe down or a wash down when it comes to milk. It doesn't really happen. And before they don't even get the inside of the milk. I had this discussion a few years ago. I don't know if anyone's been to South Africa, but Rabbi Gideon Fox, the Lubavitcher, is the Royal Victoria. I had this discussion with him, and he basically said that he had spoken to someone, another Lubavitcher, that deals with this kind of machinery. And he was convinced that some milks go get backed up in there. The guy said, no, it doesn't. Then he spoke to his mechanic, and the mechanic said, yeah, actually, when I open up these machines for fixing, I do find milk that's made its way up. So what we're looking at over here is not really just shared equipment. It's not just dairy equipment, but we're actually looking at actual dairy. So anyone that thinks that, oh, I've got my dairy-free milk, my almond, my soy, or whatever it is, and then all I'm doing is putting it in this line in the steam one, and there's no dairy whatsoever, not quite. Another thing is that okay, so first of all, you've got, I don't know how much they pay these baristas behind the counter, but he just follows whatever he's got to follow. And one thing we know is that whatever it is for kashrus and allergens, that are very different. To be yotzer given when it comes to allergens, it's obviously it's a lot more lenient. Equipment just has to be cleaned, wiped down, make sure there's no residue. There's a drop of something inside there. You know, that's not allergen-wise, you could get away with it. When it comes to, and also obviously too, you have to understand that when someone comes and is going to Starbucks where they're heating up milk and they're using the non-dairy milk, you have to understand that there's milk around. So when it comes to, let's say, factories that are making products and they want to say this is allergen-free, so yes, a lot of time they'll write, okay, this is also produced in a facility that has milk or soy or whatever goes on there. But when it comes to just the equipment, all they have to do is they have to clean it, and they'll do a swab. They'll just swab it, and they'll take their swabs, they'll take it to a lab, they'll just check it to make sure that, okay, there's no allergen left on there. And that's basically it. That's all they have to do. Now, kashrus-wise, obviously that's not enough, right? It's a constant discussion I get with companies where they're like, well, it's allergen-free, we swabbed it, there's no residue left. I said, yeah, but kashrus is a little different. We take a little higher standard. So anyways, when it comes to sweet steam wand, a lot of people think that the problem is that it just shares with dairy. Really, the problem is that there's actually dairy residue inside, and it's not actually cleaned properly throughout every single run. So that's when it comes to any type of latte or cappuccino, whatever it is. Now, the reason, interestingly enough, in this article from the CRC, they write there that there is a concept called a kiddie latte. It basically is that you can heat the milk up, they will heat the milk up to 115 degrees, so it's not piping hot, but it's warm, 115 degrees Fahrenheit, and then they will, and then you can have it that way. But that is only fine if the issue is that it's just shared with you. The problem is that it's not just dairy equipment, it's actual dairy residue left inside itself, then that is an issue, right?
What about bashishim?
Bottle bashishim? First of all, two things. First of all, we don't really know how much residue is inside. Second of all, if you're talking about blears, if you're talking about whatever is in the actual steam one itself, definitely you have to evaluate based off the whole steam one itself, and you have to make a calculation for that. That's number one. Number two, there's a rule in the bottom of this that we're not allowed to go and butter something. So when you have a company that they may do bittul. Now, any respectable hechsher is not going to give a hechsher on something that there was bittul in. But when it comes to kalim and equipment, we could actually say, well, if the issa that was in it was bottles, therefore our kalim situation is a little different. However, and why we would accept that is because a company itself, a Kosher company, they can move up for themselves. That's the thing they can do. But if someone's making a drink for you, and there's bittul in there, so the rule, they can't bottle that for you. So first of all, you have to make the calculation, and even if it was bittul b'shishim, they still can't do that for you. That's but also I have a question.
Listen, on a home espresso machine,
Yeah.
the steel wand has like a plastic cover tube that goes on top of it, only halfway. So if you have two of those plastic covers, that's the only thing that comes in contact with the soy milk or real milk. Is it still milk if you swap out one plastic cover tube with another plastic?
Okay, so general rule when it comes to equipment, how can one kli answer another kli, right? How can one kli, which is not kosher or whatever it is, contaminate, so to speak, another kli? So if I have a kli which is milking, what would make the other kli that it's touching to be milked as well? So it says, so the rule is kli also kli elaborated. Has to be liquid. So now if I'm putting there's steam around there.
Steam inside the mitten.
Now, can I guarantee for sure that within those two walls, between the plastic and that metal, that there's no liquid at all?
No, some might splash up.
Exactly.
But not inside the steel.
Right. But still, you've got, so again, it would be.
It's the outside of the steel, is he not?
Okay, so first of all, it's something I'll have to see to be able to make a proper decision on it. But at least between clean and clear, it would be very hard to say that it's not dairy, that someone's not dairy. That's the start. Now, when it comes to with inside, again, if you clean it enough and there's no residue inside,
You pull off the plastic, and outside of the steel, maybe on top, there may be some residue. Steel will.
but there's also everything that
It
inside.
doesn't go inside. Steam only comes out. Goes out.
Okay, so that was something that you have to take it step by step
Yeah.
and be able to see over there. In theory, if there's no residue left over, so then it is a milk clean,
Right,
right? It's a milk clean,
right.
but
The outside.
so yeah, but then the clean hopefully itself is milk. So then that's
Okay.
So definitely between plastic and between the metal inside, it's very hard to say that there's definitely going to be liquid in there, and therefore it would also penetrate and make that clean, the wand itself milk. Okay, going that route. Anyways, okay, so that's talking about steam wands and heated milk. Now let's talk about black coffee. Okay, so now in theory, black coffee on its own, not that much of no issue really, right? As we explained before, coffee is never what? In its disposable cup. I mean, you can rely on that on whatever the William Marshall said, but even then, you don't have to go in the whole cliche in your business. You can get a disposable cup. One of the first things you always do when you come to a new country, you always have to learn how to say black coffee to go, and then that's always a rule. So, are there any issues with black coffee? So again, I'm only talking about Starbucks here because the information I have is Starbucks. I don't know how it is with Dunkin' Donuts. I don't know how it is with other coffee houses. Everyone has to be assessed on its own. But we're talking about Starbucks here because the information that I was privy to is Starbucks. So in Starbucks, only those are made with the espresso machine. Why? Because one issue that we have with Starbucks is the dishwasher. Okay? So believe it or not, Starbucks makes a whole bunch of other stuff over there, not coffee related, definitely not kosher related. So, and that all gets chucked in the dishwasher and all washed up with hot water and everything like that. So, now officially, when it comes, there's two types of black coffees that they have. They have black coffees that come from the espresso machine, and there's a black coffee where it's where you've got the drip coffee and it goes through them. Now, officially, the brew basket, which is the part where you've got the beans in, the water drips down there, and then that, and then from there into your cup, that brew basket officially is not supposed to go into the dishwasher. However, they throw it in the dishwasher, right? So what I saw is that it's thrown in the dishwasher a lot, and so therefore that piece would be problematic, right? Now the CRC, they wrote in their article that possibly could say that piece is shiny, so therefore as well it's less of an issue, like we discussed. But still, So that piece is definitely problematic. Now, but those that are made in the espresso machine, so those parts that they use in the espresso machine are not dishwasher safe. They can't go in the dishwasher. So therefore, they always have to wash by hand. If they wash by hand, that's a different story. So therefore, we're not really concerned about that. So therefore, if you want to get an espresso, that's going to be fine. And if you want a regular black coffee, so you ask for them to make an Americano, which is basically an espresso with some water added to it. So that's when you go to Starbucks, what we get. Now, when it comes to cold brew, is basically where they take the beans and they steep them in cold water, and they will sit there for 20 hours. Now, we know that when we're dealing with cold, anything cold, and especially cold liquids, I should be more accurate, is that 24 hours are cut off, because up until beyond 24 hours, so we have kobush. So therefore, it's something sits in the cleave after 24 hours, and then it can absorb from whatever's in the cleave. So these sit for 20 hours, and we don't have a problem really when it comes to kobush. So the cold brew is fine as well. Now it comes to iced coffee, which is interesting, is that she told me that, as you see over there, you've just got the container over there with all the ice in it, and therefore things get splashed around and things go in that ice container. So she said, you got to make sure your ice is clean. So I asked her, is it ridiculous to ask a barista to wash your ice for you before you get it? She said, well, if you can get someone to do that, good luck. So using the ice, again, you got to make sure it's clean. That's for that. But yeah, so if you basically, what you can get from the Starbucks is you can get anything made from the espresso machine, and you can get yourself a cold brew.
No, both Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks. If you order a double espresso with hot water on the side,
Yeah.
they don't charge for the hot water like they would for tea.
Right.
But you get to adjust it because you want to adjust the strength of your
Sure,
coffee.
sure.
They do that all the time, no charge. So you can always get a double or triple espresso, and you are sure
And you
it's
yourself
always
adjusted, yeah. And also, as I've been told too, that what? Well, I honestly don't know what that is.
They take the pine.
Oh, and they will do that. They'll pour them over for you.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, so that's totally open. That's fine.
well, you're grinding it. It's like
Oh, in a minute. The problem
Grinder.
is that piece itself. Is that piece washed in the dishwasher or not?
So I actually heard that. I don't know if this is true, but they don't use dishwasher. And that's why it's less of an issue than Starbucks.
That could be. The problem with equipment from Starbucks is the dishwasher that they use. One thing to see, I see right in the article is that the kiosks, the Starbucks kiosks don't have dishwashers, so therefore a lot of these issues aren't. So therefore, black coffee is going to be black coffee. They should be fine. But then again, like everything, and the reason why I say Starbucks is because practically that's what I've had information for it. And like everything, reality is it depends practically how it works. And theories are great, but you always have to, in everything in conscious and obviously everything in life, you always have to check practically to see how they actually work. Doesn't actually make sense whatever goes on. So it could be, it's just something that needs actually looking into. The pour over, I would think if it was done in a Starbucks, that piece would also have a problem with dishwashing, and therefore I wouldn't do a pour over in Starbucks for that reason.
First you have to ask them to wash your eyes.
Right then. That's why it's just better to go to a kosher place and done.
What about gas station coffee?
Same thing, it really depends what goes on over there. I don't know. It honestly has never looked appetizing to me to go gas station.
The main concern is the dishwasher.
What?
The main concern is the dishwasher.
That would be a concern.
Why is it not a common gun?
What?
Why is it not a common gun?
It's a very good question. I had a feeling someone asked me that. So we know there's a general rule that when it comes to equipment that stam keliming of the yom, that's the rule, right? So that generally equipment is we can have a general rule of chazaka that we can say that equipment has not been used within 24 hours, right? That's halakha. Now, why would 24 hours make a difference? Is because we say that anything which the kli has absorbed, so Because again, what we're concerned about any flavor, right? There's a general rule as well, so therefore the flavor is like the actual forbidden substance itself. So we're concerned about the flavor. So now, we're only concerned about flavor if it's actually going to enhance the food that we put in there. But if it's actually going to ruin it, then we're not really concerned about the flavors in there. So after 24 hours, if you have a pot and you cook in a forbidden substance, that flavor after 24 hours is going to spoil. So therefore, if we do cook something kosher inside, the flavor that's going to go from the pot into the food is going to be a spoiled flavor, and then we're not concerned with the ever, right? Like we can't do that, but with the ever, we're not going to be concerned. Now, so there's a general rule, which we learn halacha, that's the stam kelim. So if we find it clear, regular clear, we can say that, it hasn't been used within 24 hours. Therefore, if it was used, it's if there's any issue with flavor, it's a spoiled flavor, and then we don't have that issue. Now, that is a general rule we can say for somebody in their house that doesn't use their equipment that often. But if industrial places, that rule doesn't really apply because it's not practical. And like everything, you have to be practical. You have to see practically is it done like that. So let's go like industrial, right? Let's start off and I cover the car. But take industrial. So you're talking about equipment that's hundreds of thousands of dollars, even millions of dollars. That thing can't rest. Like, it's just not going to happen, right? Because every minute that it's resting, they're losing money. This thing's an investment. It's got to churn out whatever it's churning out. So equipment doesn't rest. Generally, yes, they may do a full maintenance or full wash down once a week, whatever it is. But sometimes a full maintenance could be a full shift, right? So a full 8 hours to actually wash these machines. So they don't want to wash it that often. A lot of companies, what they'll do is, for example, talking about allergens, they will start with the non-allergen foods in the beginning of the week and slowly build up with allergens. So add your soy, add your milk, whatever it is. And then at the end, they do a full wash down because they don't want to have to wash it. They don't want this, they don't have to wash it that much. They don't want the equipment to be down because it's down, they're losing money. So to say that stam kelim in the yom that's going to be casually left around and not being used doesn't happen in the industry, right? And so therefore, especially when it comes to dairy equipment, we can't say, possibly that it wasn't used for 24 hours. It doesn't work. Okay.
Soap in the dishwasher.
So slow down. So we'll get to it. But so I'm on your first question. So let's do that there. Now, so going to the gas station coffee, we have to also look at it as well. Gas station coffees, caterers, restaurants, or things like that. Similarly as well, everything's used the whole time, right? It's impossible to say that, there's a chance that it's been rested. No, it hasn't been rested. It's practical. We see that. Yeah, you walk into someone's home and they all of a sudden gave you a coffee and whatever it was, and then you can say something in the oven because we know in ourselves. We don't use all the pots and pans and all the equipment, all the cutlery and crockery and everything in our homes. It's something we don't do, right? But industrial, catering, restaurants, food service, that's something that just happens all the time. Now, when it comes to the soap, to say that it's something you have to verify. With the evid, if someone would wash something by mistake in the dishwasher and there was soap or whatever it is, you could say maybe that the soap spoils the flavor. That's something that the evid you can technically say. But I don't know if you'll have to go and say, want to use that at Chatzila. That's a little.
What if I order a coffee and they give me a regular black coffee and I pay for it already? Now I have it in my hand. They use the dishwasher and the industrial soap. I drink it.
Can you drink it? Yeah. Well, they sort of go ahead and just do it. Well, technically, based off the CRC article, which says that the brew basket could say it's a cliche, and cliche with the evidence is okay. So, and it also has to be hefsed godel. Which buying coffee in Starbucks you have to hefsed godel, I would say. So possibly, but to be honest, you can tell them around and say, hey, I didn't want that one on my Americano with water on the side. So, that's what we want. But whatever, if someone drank it by mistake and they drank it, that they say al-fate, I think they can go without the al-fate. All right, any more questions?
There's a type of coffee that gets dehusked and everything else in a completely organic, natural way. It's very expensive. It's called kopi buak, and it's 5 to 10 times more expensive than regular coffee because it gets ingested by this rodent. And then it gets hand-picked up, the remains, and washed and sold. And people say it's the most delicious. Does that need a hechsher? What can we learn from bees? We don't need bees, but honey is kosher.
That's okay. I mean, I remember we actually got the okay. We got an application for that many
You did?
years ago. We got an application.
What happened?
It didn't go through. Now I don't know why it didn't go through, but I don't know if it ended up going to a POSEC to ask if we can or can't do it. But that's something which is something that I have to ask on the Oscar the generation what that is. In my mind, I can mostly think, there's whatever. I mean, on one hand, it's ingested and doesn't come out the most pleasing way. However, to be honest, it comes to these kind of things. Who is the guy that figured out that there is an animal that ingested coffee beans and then knocked them out and that would taste good, right?
Well,
So I don't know. It's similar to there's another thing when it comes to
Before they had
flavors.
these chemicals, machines, that maybe might have been the only best way.
So all I know is that there's similar things also you can find with vanilla flavor. So vanilla flavor can be extracted from a very interesting place, from behind a beaver. And the question is, who came up with that? I don't know. Like you had so many interesting sources. We find anything that's natural.
Yeah.
You got whatever, especially in the Kosher world. They like it when it's synthetic.
Really?
And people turn around and say, "Oh, it's natural." Like, ooh, okay, so I don't know about that. But, yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. So that's one thing where you'll have to find out exactly what happens. And, does it actually spoil the taste or not? But yeah, exactly. And if anyone has that's why you should always get into that routine, because that way if the question does come up, at least you know that the taste has been spoiled and you don't have to, it's less of a shadow when one goes on.
Don't close the door on that.
We'll continue with the questions in a second, but before everyone goes, we still have a ton of food. I put out the takeaway trays, bring home to your family, and enjoy.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I see.